the same kind of line that I'll use out here to communicate the ending of a form, you'll see that reappear in these other areas, which are one form in front of either a space or another form or another form. So when you look at like the language of this drawing, primarily we're dealing with endings of forms and continuations of forms. Now, what comes out of that is the sort of language of sort of line and gesture that you're using that sort of grammar to pronounce, right? So then with this line, I have this opportunity to then establish how the form is flowing more through here than it is through here. And so depending upon the kind of edge or line that you use, you can comment about depth between here and here, whereas here and here there's less depth. There's a lot of depth here and here, but then maybe there is less depth between here and here. So that variation of line is about kind of communicating depth and beginnings and endings of forms. Hopefully that's not too kind of granular for this discussion, but it's actually one of the things that I really, the language of drawing I think is just really exciting, and there's so much that you can talk about with it. To me, these things are just like, impastos and glazes, and, I look at line quality as something that is, again, it's like, it's a formal quality of the art that we're making, and it can be as poetic as you're willing to make it with your investment of like thought and time and expression. We also, then have to consider what does line mean in terms of impression. And you'll see like in an area like this that I'm working on now, where I'm trying to diminish actually a little bit the sense of this edge in between the zygomatic bone and the ramus of the mandible, right? And this then starts to become almost a purely aesthetic thing, which is actually something that I've come to be interested in more from the sake of watching sculptors and watching sculptors work. Sculptors have a very, I think, necessarily different way of kind of viewing form and the represented world. For them, the idea of where something is and something is not is implicit in what they're working with, right? So if you put a piece of clay onto a sculpture, there is a form there. And so the idea of illustrating where it is or is not is actually not the kind of primary, like, expressive choice. For them, it's how that form creates the illusion of shadow and light, which I think actually becomes interesting in that I'm able to kind of play with through using this language of ending a form versus continuation of form to kind of set apart my subject from the world around it. And now I know this is getting like pretty far out there. But if all of this is graphite or all of this is clay, then I can potentially allude to that or show some sense of that through how I treat the boundaries in between itself. Hopefully that's not way too far down the rabbit hole for anyone. But that's where a lot of my kind of more expressive ideas come from. First is kind of looking at sculpture, but also like thinking about the language of drawing and how I can use that language of drawing to kind of comment on the subject, you know? That's what really kind of keeps me making portrait drawings. Obviously I'm interested in humanity and people and their various expressions, but the material itself I think is just so beautiful.